Hi everyone! Today I'm going to be making some Christmas cards. Well, one Christmas card and two designs. So we are heading into the Christmas season, and what better way to try to get into that spirit than to create some holiday cards. So I'm going to start out with this new Avery Elle stamp set that I just got. It's called Caroling Critters. I think it's really cute and I think it's going to be fun to color in. So first thing, I'm going to cut my panel. Actually, not my panel. This is just where I'm going to stamp my images. And I'm going to stamp a bunch of images and then create a little scene. So I'm using neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock because I am going to color this in with Copic markers. And I'm just arranging them, scattering them around, and getting ready to use my stamp positioner tool. This is the Precision Press by We Are Memory Keepers. And I like how many stamps I can fit on it. It's pretty large. And now you're going to see why I like to use a stamp press. So I'm inking them up really well. But despite that, I don't get a really clear impression. And you can see in the center there all the places where it needs to be restamped. And I'm using Memento ink, and I can do this over and over and over again because I'm using the press and get a perfectly crisp black image. I do most stamps at least twice. Here I'm having a little bit of trouble with that little rabbit, but on the third try it works and I have all the images. And I also like how quick it is. I can stamp 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 images in one shot. So that's pretty cool. Cleaning up my workspace because black smudges. I don't know what it is about myself and that Memento ink, but I get it everywhere. Now I'm doing some Copic coloring, and this is YG03, YG13, and YG17. So it's one of my favorite green combinations, and I usually color in light. I add in my shadows with the dark, and then I blend in with the medium. Sometimes I have to go back and forth and do it a few times, but that's usually my pattern that I stick to. And that's what I'm doing here, and it seems to work. I'm definitely not a Copic expert by any means, but I've watched enough YouTube videos and practiced enough, because that really is the key, practicing coloring, and you'll get better and better at the blending. The reds for me are the most difficult. This red is R22, R24, and R29 because they tend to bleed on me. So bleed outside of the lines. So I'm very careful with the amount of ink that I use. I'm loving this little lantern. But I'm going to move on. You'll see that I don't color full images. I will go back and forth and color bits and pieces of all 4 images or all 5 images because I'm thinking of how the card is going to look and how I want to shuffle color around. So I'm not positive how I'm going to color in the bottom of that lantern yet. It depends on how it looks against the blue that I've chosen for the polar bear sweater. And the blues for the polar bear sweater are BG 000, BG01, and BG05. And that gives me this really nice aqua that I go back to a lot as well. Same process. Light, fill it in with light, add in my shadows with the darkest, and then blend with the medium. And lots of times I'll have to go back and do that entire process over. Carefully adding in the reds and hoping they don't bleed into the blues, which they didn't this time. I tend to have a heavy hand sometimes. So I'm deciding that the red in the sweater would make a really nice transition to the red at the bottom of the lantern. I've colored in all my images. I just kind of fast forwarded through that because Copic blending tends to be a little bit tedious sometimes, at least to watch. I like to do, maybe not so much watch. I do have the steel die for this because I was not cutting these shapes out. I don't buy steel dies for every set, but for this one definitely. And that's my favorite part, when you pop them out and you get your finished product right there. Now off camera, I had already also done a second set because I do plan to make at least 2 cards in one sitting. And so I colored those a little bit differently. I did that polar bear in pink and orange. And so here I'm just going to arrange them on some fog cardstock by My Favorite Things. It's a really pale gray. I'm just making sure that the width is going to work, and it does. I will cut the panel down to slightly smaller than an A2 card, so probably 4 by 5 1/4 here. Arranging my scene. What do I do with that little bird? Once I have my panel cut out, I'm going to create a textured background. So I'm thinking little stars and little dots, almost like snowflakes. So I'm using a Liquitex modeling paste. And I couldn't find my spatula this time around, so I'm using an old credit card and my finger. I usually don't like to get messy, but in this technique, it works best for me because I can get into those there are some really tiny dots in this, and I can be sure that I get into all those small places. So I put a nice layer, and then to even it out so that they're not all bumpy and all different widths, I guess, I scrape off the excess with a credit card, and it gives me a nice clean look. Now, in the video it doesn't show it, but I did probably take a minute or two and stepped aside and let that modeling paste on the right hand side dry before doing the other side. This is a really easy technique. I'm not too crazy about getting it really perfect because there's going to be so much going on, and you can see it's definitely not perfect, and I'm going to try to scrape some off here because I don't like how it overlapped, and off to the left side there's not as many flakes, but it all works out in the end because I know that a lot of it is going to get covered up with my scene, and that's what I want. Snow doesn't fall perfectly, so it shouldn't on my card either, and I really want the focus to stay on my critters, my caroling critters. Next step is to build the scene. And so I placed the lantern. That will just sort of divide the card into a left and a right for me. We're going to put the polar bear, we're going to pop them up with some pop dots to give the card a little bit of dimension. And then we're going to pop up just the little bird. So we've got 2 flat elements, the bunny and the owl, and the lantern piece, and then we've got 2 pop dotted elements, the bird and the polar bear. Next, I'm going to stamp my sentiment, and it says "From Our House to Yours." It's really simple and done at the bottom of the card. And there you have it. That's my card. Taking a second look, I decided to add a few musical notes. I felt like the background needed a little bit more movement, and I like how it ties into the theme, and it sort of says, hey, we're here, we're singing and we're caroling, and it adds to that, and I like that. So I oftentimes will put my cards aside, and then I'll walk back in and take a second look at them, and it just hits me exactly what I need. And in this case, it was a few scattered musical notes, and that will just tie the design all together and add a little bit of whimsy. And just those few musical notes finishes off the card. And then you can see the detail, the texture and the pop dots and the bright colors on the gray background. That's one of my favorite cards from this season. Now take a look at the second card I made. This one has a little more pop of color. We have a hot pink and orange going on. It's a little bit smaller. I wanted to concentrate more on the text this time, so I did put 2 titles in it. We wish you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and maybe you can see in the background there's very light gray musical notes. Hard to see on video or in the photo, but in real life they're really there. And I also stamped the word Christmas in the musical booklet that the bunny and the owl are sharing. So those were my 2 little touches that I added, and another idea for the Avery Elle Caroling Critters stamp set. Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel for more card making and scrapbooking inspiration.